Yeah. One of the things that we love to do, my wife and I and all the kids, there's a couple shows that we really enjoy watching on a regular basis. One of those shows is American Ninja Warrior, which is evidenced by all the feet print and the handprints on all of our hallway walls as they're scaling everything that they can climb. Another show that we watch regularly is America's Got Talent. Anybody watch America's Got Talent? Any AGT fans? Okay. Well, they're coming towards the end of it, and basically what it is, if you're not familiar with it, basically it's a giant national talent show, right? You can do anything. You can sing, you can dance, you can juggle, you can be a clown, you can roller skate, I mean, all kinds of dog tricks, everything you think of. It's a giant talent show. Well, recently on one of the episodes, I don't know if this last week or the week before, there was a guy named Eric Jones who came on the show, and he's a magician or a sleight of hand illusionist, right? And so he does little card tricks and hides different things, and you know how it goes. So he's up there and he's doing this trick where he starts out with a $2 bill. He's got it folded up, and he waves his hands, and whoop, all of a sudden now the $2 bill becomes 4 coins, and which is neat and everything. Because I look at it and go, I don't really know how you did that, but I get a general idea, right? It's not like so important. You've seen people do that kind of thing before, and you know what's going on, right? The $2 bill is there the whole time. The 4 coins are there all the time. He just got it hidden behind his fingers, thumbs, and you know how it is, right? He misdirects where you're looking, and I don't know how he did it, but I get the general idea. He was directly involved in the act, and therefore he kind of manipulated what I saw, and there it was, right? I understand that. But then he takes the 4 quarters that poof into thin air, right? He takes the 4 quarters that he had up his sleeve, and then he goes and he puts them in a couple of the judges' hands. And what he does next is really, really interesting. And rather than just me telling you about it, I want you to see what he does next. I think it's kind of fun.
If you could open your right hand, sir. I'm going to give you all 4 coins to keep on the palm of your hand, kind of like a table. Yeah. If you could take your other hand, cover the coins, and if you don't mind, shake the coins in your hands, and let the air in there so you can hear the coins jingle, and imagine that I can take one of the coins out, make it invisible, and toss it away. That would, of course, leave only 3 coins in your hands. Dump them onto the table, show them what you've got.
Oh, come on.
Right here. But it gets even better.
I'm scared.
Guess what?
What?
You are my favorite judge. Just don't tell him. Don't tell him. Would you mind opening your right hand? I'm going to leave all 3 coins just here on the palm of the hand so you can see everything. Here's what I'd like you to do. Don't tell me which, but I want you to look at one of the 3 coins and concentrate on it.
Concentrate
on one of the 3 coins. Just don't let me know which one.
Okay.
Now, I want you to imagine that you could cause that coin to become invisible and vanish without me even touching the coins.
Okay.
Let me know when you have that in your mind.
Yes.
Now, what we can do is we can make what happens in the imagination real the moment you dump those coins onto the table, whenever you're ready.
Really?
Yeah.
And then there's going to be just 2 when I do that?
You'll see when I find out. Mind blown, yeah?
This is a fun trick because the first one, like I said, the one I told you about, where he take the $2 bills and he kind of moves something the way, he's directly involved in the act, and so it's evident that I don't know what he did, but he did something, right? His involvement made the act. But then he does these next 2 are so different. He takes the 4 coins and he puts them in Simon Cowell's hand, and then he steps away. He removes his hand from what is going on, and he steps back, and he gives the illusion that he's no longer in control, right? He's giving the illusion that he's distancing himself, and that it all rests on Simon Cowell. And then he dumps it out, or he shakes it up and he dumps it out, and we find out that Eric Jones was in control the entire time. And then he takes those 3 coins, he puts them in Heidi's hand, and again, and I love what she says, she says, I'm scared. Why? But she didn't know what to expect. right? She didn't know what was going on. So she says, I'm scared. And she dumps him out, and the 3 now become 2. And after, right at the moment, he steps away, he pulls his hand back, he becomes uninvolved in the activity that's going on, and then the 2 coins appear, and then you go, okay, he's in control the whole time. Now, I know God's not a trick magician or a sleight of hand illusionist, but I can't help but see some spiritual parallels in this. So we've all had moments where something was put in our hand and we went, I'm scared, right? We've all had those circumstances, those situations of life. We've all had something that was brought in front of us, placed in our lap, and we just said, I wish this wasn't here. A loss, uncertainty, something we had to do that we didn't think we'd be able to make it through. The not knowing brings fear, and we've all been in that situation before. And those of us strong Christians, we know what to do when we face something we don't know what to do. We don't know how it's going to turn out. We don't know if I can do what is being asked of me to do. We're good Christians. What do? We turn to God. And at the same time, there's always there's that time, maybe you've experienced it before, where you turn to God and it just felt like He was so far away. You turned to God and it was like all of a sudden it seemed like God went quiet. Like He'd stepped back from the activities of what going on, and no matter how hard you prayed, no matter how hard you acted, it just seemed like God was at a distance. And you were scared. In fact, that's exactly what we're going to see happen as we continue in our text today. As we've been studying through the Gospel of John, we find ourselves right now in the middle of the crucifixion. Actually, at the end of the crucifixion. John chapter 19. Last week we looked at his death. With a primary focus being on that statement that He makes on the cross in verse 30, John 19:30, it is finished. We looked at the completed work of the cross and the implications that has for us. However, there was a few details that we touched on, and I want to go back there for a moment today. Remember, he inserted some details into the story that seemed nominal, that seemed unimportant. He talked about the way that the soldiers divided His clothing and then gambled for the rest. He talked about the way that He was thirsty and they gave Him vinegar to drink, and then He spoke of the fact that these are things that were prophesied 1,700 years prior. And what we see in this telling of the cross is that even when Jesus was nailed to a tree, He was still fully in control of His death. Everything was happening exactly as He had caused it and directed it. And now we come to a point in the story. Jesus is now dead. He says, Jesus said, it is finished. Then He gave up His spirit. And now, if more so probably than any other time in human history, one could say, God has left. And now, more than any other time you could ever imagine, we see Jesus in the flesh was crucified. He's gone, He's dead, and He's no more. If anybody could say, where is God now? It would be His disciples. So this is where we're at in the story, and I want to look at what it is that John focuses on in this moment in history. We're going to pick up right there. Jesus has died. John chapter 19, verse 31. So now is the day of preparation, and the next day was to be a special Sabbath. That special Sabbath was the Passover. Because the Jews did not want the bodies left on the cross during the Sabbath, they asked Pilate to have the legs broken and the bodies taken down. So what would happen in crucifixion? Crucifixion, there's a lot easier ways. There's a lot easier ways to kill somebody. Pull out a sword. It's quick, it's clean, it's over. But Rome was not necessarily into the business of just executing for the sake of execution. If they were going to execute somebody, they were going to make a spectacle out of it. They're going to make an example out of it. And so the crucifixion was not something that just happened really quickly. We'll nail you up, we'll poke you, you'll bleed to death, and you'll be done. In fact, it was something that would often take days before somebody would die from crucifixion, because it wasn't bleeding to death that was normally the cause of the crucifixion, but rather it was suffocation. So while the person is hanging on the cross, bare and exposed and humiliated, beaten and nailed down to this cross, they would be hanging from the nails in their hands, and the whole of their body weight would cause their bodies to sag with their arms above them, feet pierced to the bottom. And they would sag and they would shrink down, and after time, their body weight and exhaustion, their lungs would begin to collapse and not be able to breathe. And so what you would have to do while on the cross, you'd have to push yourself up. Your back rubs raw against the rugged cross. You'd push up for a deep breath, and then you'd begin to sink. And it was over and over and over and over until pure exhaustion, dehydration set in, and you no longer had the strength and the energy to raise up, and you would suffocate. It was a gruesome, brutal, embarrassing, shameful way to die. And he drew it out. So here the Jews are like, okay, we finally got Jesus on the cross, but tomorrow, like the Passover is starting soon. In fact, they counted days different. We count days from midnight to midnight, right? That's one day. We know the new day starts when we celebrate the new year. It's at midnight, because midnight to midnight is one day. But the Jews counted their days. They divided up their days differently. It was from sundown to sundown, which is why on the Sabbath they would do no work from sundown, right? So that would be the start of the day. Once the sun goes down, that'd be the start of their Sabbath. When the sun goes down on Saturday, that would be the end of the Sabbath, and they could work and do whatever they needed to do. Well, the holidays were the same way, right? That's how days started. So Passover is happening in just a few hours. It's middle of the afternoon on Friday. Passover is coming very, very soon. Jesus has only been on the cross for not entirely long. And the Jews are like, okay, we got him up there. Now we just got to finish this off. We made a spectacle of him. He got embarrassed. Everybody sees that we beat Jesus. We executed an innocent man. So now we have to make sure we tie this up so that these bodies aren't lingering there during to spoil our holy celebration. So they wanted them down. So what they would do, if any time the Romans needed to expedite the crucifixion, is they would take a club. They'd go to the one on the cross, and they would bash in and shatter their shin bones, which means they could no longer come up for air. And so they'd sit, and the suffocation would happen very, very quickly. So then we come to verse 32, and it's exactly what they do. It says, the soldiers therefore came, and they broke the legs of the first man who had been crucified with Jesus, and then those of the other. But then they came to Jesus, and they found that he was already dead, and they did not break his legs. Instead, one of the soldiers pierced Jesus' side with a spear, bringing a sudden flow of blood and water. So they see that he's already dead, no need to break his legs. He was clearly dead, but just to make sure he was dead, they're going to, obviously he's going to be up off the ground a little bit, so they shove a spear in his side, comes up right up under his rib cage, and the blood and water. Medical scholars, whatnot, have slightly different opinions exactly what it is, but in short, essentially, his heart burst. And it was very, very evident that at this moment in time, Jesus is dead. And that is kind of a big deal, because there are some rumors, even in John's day, there were some rumors, and still today, that, Jesus wasn't actually dead. He just passed out from the pain. They thought he was dead, and then when he came to, he got up, and then they thought he rose from the dead. And John's like, no. Verse 35 says, the man who saw, he's speaking of himself, his man who saw has given testimony, and his testimony is true. He knows that he tells the truth, and he testifies so that you also may believe. He said, listen, I was there. Jesus had died. So what's the significance of these little details? Okay, they're going to break his legs. They didn't break his legs. Instead, they stuck him with a spear. He tells us in verse 36, these things happened so that the scripture would be fulfilled. Not one of his bones will be broken. which we see in Psalm chapter 34:20. And as another scripture says, they will look upon the one they have pierced. We see that in Zechariah 10, and we also see that in Isaiah 53. He was pierced for our transgressions. Psalm written approximately 1,000 years before this event. Isaiah 53, that famous prophecy of Christ that foretells the details of a substitution Lamb of God that was going to come and take the sins of the world, prophesied 700 years before he comes. You know what? That's like if something was going to be prophesied that happened today, that would be roughly 200 years before Christopher Columbus sailed across the ocean. Jesus is dead. And yet he is in full control of what is going on. Even more so, John continues. Now, like I said, the Romans would make a spectacle. Not only would a crucifixion last up to days, but once they died, I mean, this is a criminal, right? An enemy of the state. And so they're not going to give them a proper burial. What they would often do, they'd leave them up on the cross. I mean, there were times they'd leave them up on the cross for weeks. And their bodies would rot in the public for all to see, and animals would feast on them. It was a grotesque and horrible experience. If and when they would take the bodies off the cross, they would go and there's no burial, there's no grave. They would throw them in the valley where they burned their trash, the garbage dump. And this is what would happen to those who are crucified. However, with Jesus, there's these prophecies. And if Jesus was going to prove that he was in control, then everything that was said about him through the voice of God to the prophets has to come true, right? Or else he's no longer in control. And so there's these prophecies that had been spoken so long ago. One of them was that he was going to be in the grave for 3 days. Now again, this is one that has caught me, especially when I was younger, that I wrestled through this going, okay, I have a hard time. Jesus wasn't, the way I count days, Jesus was not in the grave for 3 days. It was not even 2 days. And because I measure days in 24-hour periods, right? But then I forget that I'm so arrogant in this. Sometimes I think that the way that I think is the way that it's like the universal right way to think, right? We tend to do that. But the Jewish way of counting days was different. Not right or wrong, it was just different, right? And so if they were counting how many days until a particular event, they would count any part of the day that we have to go through, right? So if you were going to count days from here until, next Saturday, you'd start by counting today. Whether it's right now or if it's like 10 minutes before sundown, it's still Sunday. In their case, Friday. Prophecy said that Jesus is going to be in the grave for 3 days, which means if he's going to stay on schedule, if he's going to demonstrate his power and demonstrate his control even in the grave, that things need to begin to progress in the way they're supposed to, which means he needs to be in the grave. Somebody who does not normally get a grave at all in execution, he needs to be in the grave in just a couple hours before sundown. This is kind of a problem. Isaiah 53 also says, and I'm paraphrasing here, he says that he will be killed with the wicked. Essentially, he will die a criminal's death, but he will be buried, he will go to death among the rich. Which is kind of an interesting thing as well, because that would not normally be the case. If you're dying the wicked, you'd be tossed aside. If you were dying wealthy, and rich and prominent and influential, it wouldn't be dying a criminal's death. So this doesn't really make sense. So we got these two prophecies that are taking place, and yet what we're about to see is Jesus, even in the grave, is still in control. It says later, Joseph of Arimathea asked Pilate for the body of Jesus. Now Joseph was a disciple of Jesus, but secretly because he feared the Jews. And we learned in the other gospel writings of the same story that Joseph was a very wealthy man. He was one of the member of the Sanhedrin, the highest ruling council in Israel. He was a fluent man. He was also an influential man. There would be few people, none of Jesus' disciples would have had the influence to get an audience with Pilate to even make the request. And yet, God knows what he's doing. And he proves that he's still in control even when it seems as if he's taken a step back. And this one, the secret disciple, the disciples, his 12 probably didn't even know that Joseph of Arimathea was even a follower of Jesus. This one secret disciple, he goes and he asks, he gets an audience with Pilate. He asks his body to be taken down, which would have been something that is not normally done, and given a proper burial. He was accompanied by Nicodemus, the man who had visited Jesus at night. That's in John chapter 3. Remember when he said that he must be born again? Nicodemus brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 75 pounds. And taking Jesus' body, the two of them wrapped it up with the spices and strips of linen. This was in accordance with Jewish burial customs. And at the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden. And in the garden, a new tomb, in which no one had ever been laid, because it was the Jewish day of preparation. And since the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there. I want you to catch something there. It says, because it was a day of preparation, meaning because the sun was going down and it was almost Passover, and because it happened to be there, because it just so happened that the sun was going down, and because it just so happened that he was crucified near this place where Joseph had access to, they would have otherwise, their plan would have been to bury him somewhere altogether different, but because it just happened to be this way, they buried him exactly as it was foretold 700 years ago. I don't think it was happenstance. Jesus proved that even from the grave, he was calling the shots. I want to think about it. This is something that John has been inserting into this entire story of Jesus, the end of Jesus' life. Remember when he was betrayed, really betrayed by all of his disciples as they scattered, betrayed by Peter when he denied Christ, ultimately betrayed by Judas with a kiss. Jesus predicted, predicted is not the right word. Jesus prophesied. There was no predicting. He saw it from beginning to end. And he said, this is what is going to happen. Because Jesus was in control even over his betrayal. I know some of you felt that betrayal before, haven't you? A friend, a loved one, someone close to you. You feel that betrayal. And listen, I want you to hear something today. If Jesus is in control in the midst of his betrayal, do you not think that he's still in control while you walk through the betrayal that you face? And then his arrest, where people come and try to take him by force. And I love what he does in this moment. They say, we're looking for Jesus of Nazareth. And he says, I am. And at his name, at the sound of his voice, every knee bows as they fall over backwards. Jesus was in control even in his arrest. Listen, when attackers come against you, when there's things that are happening that are directly in opposition to you or to your agenda or what you're doing, or they're attacking you, let me tell you, you can identify with Jesus and know that he's still in control. And they take him to trial, unlawfully try him by the Jews and then by Rome, and then he gets this audience with Pilate, and Pilate says, listen, I'm trying to help you, but you're being quiet, you're being stubborn, what's going on? Don't you realize my authority? Don't you realize my authority to set you free or to have you executed? And Jesus says this, you would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Jesus was in control during his trial. And he's in control during yours. Listen, I don't know what your trial is. They're as unique and as varied as we are individuals. And I don't know what the outcome of your trial is going to be, but I know this, I can promise you this, that whatever it is, he's in control. And he goes to the cross. And while he's hanging on the cross, prophecy, big ones, little ones, all of them are fulfilled. He's in control down to the moment of his death. See, Luke says Pilate was surprised that Jesus died so soon. But back in John 10, he says, don't you know? He says, listen, I have the authority, I have the power to lay my life down and to take it back up again. No one can take my life from me, but I lay it down only to take it up again. No one can take his life, but he lays it down in the right time. Not a moment soon, not a moment late, but he's in control even of his death. Some of us, we faced loss, we faced death of a variety of kinds. And some of that can feel like the hardest, the darkest loss. Death is so final. And let me tell you, God is in control. And then he's gone. And then he's gone. He apparently steps away from mankind. Apparently brings back his hand. Seemingly no way that he could influence the outcome anymore. He stepped away. He's not involved. There's no way that he can come through now. There's no way that he can manipulate the circumstances. There's no way that he can be in control anymore. And yet you watch the events play out and it becomes evident that he's been in control the whole time. I don't know what kind of trial or struggle or death or betrayal or you faced. But I know that feeling when you reach out and you say, God, I need you. I don't know what to do with what you've placed in my hand. I don't know how I can go. I don't know what you want me to do. I don't know how this is going to turn out. I don't know how to deal with this loss. I don't know how to go another day. I don't know how to, I don't know. God, where are you? God, why are you silent? God, why have you walked away from me? Listen, God is in control. We have this really bad habit, this thing that we do far too often. And sometimes we theologically know the truth, we philosophically know the truth, but emotionally we feel otherwise, and it causes, sometimes we listen to our feelings and emotions more than we listen to the truth that we know, right? And this is what happens. We have a hard time not doing this, where we associate pleasantries and good circumstances and nice outcomes to the direct involvement and presence of God in my life. And then we associate loss and hardship and trial and death with the absence of God in my life. And there's no way you can theologically land there when I look at the story of Christ. I mean, he was in control through his betrayal, control in his arrest. He was in control during his trial. He was in control in his death. He was in control in the grave. So who am I to say that he's not in control when I face hardships in my life? Just like Eric Jones and those coins. Sometimes it appears as if he steps away. Sometimes it seems as if he pulls his hand back. But you just wait. And it may not even be this side of heaven. There are no guarantees that we're going to ever have all the right answers. But someday we're going to be able to look back and say, God, I see you are in control all the way. God, I see your hand now. See, this is a tough text to read, to study, to look at without getting to chapter 20. Chapter 20 is Sunday. Chapter 20 is the resurrection. Chapter 20 is the resolve. Chapter 20 is when everything is happily ever after. And we so quickly want to jump to Sunday. The truth is, sometimes before we get to Sunday, we got to learn how to walk through Friday. Listen, I want to be a disciple that doesn't scatter when hardships come. I want to be a disciple that doesn't run and turn tail and give up and throw in the towel every time I trip one more time. I want to be the kind of follower that says, all right, I don't see the outcome. Like Heidi Klum, I'm scared. I want to be the type of disciple that even in fear and even in the unknown and even on the uncertainty, I can say, I don't know how it's going to play out. I don't know what it's going to cost me. I don't know how this is going to turn out. But Lord, I trust that you are in control. So I'm going to walk after you. Listen, Sunday's going to come. But as you walk through, the psalmist David put it, the valley of the shadow of death. So we don't have to fear evil. Why? Because God is in control. So whether this is something that you're facing right now, or maybe for some, it's something that happened a long time ago. And you go, God, how did you let this? How did this happen? God, and you haven't got over it. You still hold God responsible for the pain in your life from the past and say, God, why were you so distant? Why were you so absent? God, why weren't you there when I needed you? And I promise you, you will see one day that God is in control and always has been. In death and in life, our God is in control. Father, you are good, gracious, powerful, sovereign, mighty, holy,